Welcome to the Mid Week Tease with me, Adele Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, let's talk about something that I am so proud that I stopped doing towards the end of last year, which is abandoning my emotional needs. We don't really talk about this as much, like the type of self-abandonment that it doesn't look dramatic. And especially for women, it's almost even expected and celebrated when you overlook your own emotional needs and you forget them in relationships, be it romantic relationships, relationships with family members, or friendships, right? And I think it goes unnoticed also because it's not like dramatic or loud, or it doesn't even look like conflicts, right? It's almost very silent, right? It's when something happens in that relationship, your body responds because physically you will feel something. Your body is so smart, but immediately you tell yourself, it's not that deep, or it's fine, or I'll deal with it. I don't need so and so to help me with this or whatever. But in reality, what I have found is it is that deep and you're not fine and you have been dealing with it alone and that's not on, right? So I really want to talk about what it means to abandon your emotional needs in relationships. Not because you don't have emotional needs, but because somewhere along the way you've learned that expressing them might cost you the connection. And I feel like this was such a huge lesson for me last year because I had a particular relationship where I was constantly thinking that my emotional needs were too much, were irrational, and secondary and not important, right? And I would try to like morph and change myself to maintain the connection. And man, it is not sustainable to abandon your emotional needs. I learned this the hard way. Like towards the end, I was just like falling apart. And I think it took one situation where I realized that not only am I abandoning my emotional needs, which is wrong on its own, but even that sacrifice is not being seen or acknowledged in that specific relationship. So I was like, fuck it. I have to choose myself and I have to release, right? And immediately I did that. And I really think I was telling one of my girlfriends, I really think this is like my ancestors just affirming, right? Immediately I released, another connection came along my way. And it was weird because all of the parts of me and parts of my emotional needs that in the first connection I thought were irrational were seen and honored immediately in the second connection, almost like an affirmation from whoever you believe in. For me, it's my ancestors, like an affirmation that go where you're seen, man. Go where you're not too much and go where you don't have to abandon your emotional needs. And I feel like a lot of women, we weren't taught how to ask for emotional care. We were always taught to just adapt around the absence of it and to give it. So what happens is like we minimize what we feel, right? And we over empathize with others. We become low maintenance. Hey, never again. We stay quiet to keep the peace, and slowly but surely you start to leave yourself behind. And because this was such a huge lesson for me, if you came for our group therapy session last year, the last cohort, we ended the cohort with a cake and we were all sticking flags into it as to what we're most proud of. There's a video of it on our Legally Clueless Instagram page, actually. I actually said, I'm so proud that I have stopped abandoning my emotional needs. This was such a huge challenge for me. I really dug deep to try and understand, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And honestly, from a psychological perspective, when you look at like the attachment theory, right? And this is developed by John Bowlby, it explains that early relationships teach us what keeps love intact, right? And so for many women, the lesson wasn't you can need and still be loved. It was don't need too much, don't disrupt, don't ask, so that the love is maintained. So instead of saying like I need reassurance, which is like a very rational thing to need, instead of just of saying that, we over explain, we over give, we over function, right? And it's not because we're needy, but it's because like our emotional needs have never been met safely, and we were never socialized to ask for them to be met, or to voice when they're not being met, or to even recognize that it is okay for us to have these needs. And this pattern often starts very early. And I know I talk about this guy a lot to you, Gabor Mate, and he always talks about how trauma isn't just about what happened to us, but it's about what happened inside us, because of the trauma that we experience, right? And most of the times, the trauma happens, and what happens inside when there's no support is your emotions were dismissed or spiritualized, or punished or met with withdrawal. So your nervous system learned something very specific, that in order to preserve a connection, you have to erase yourself, self-erasure. And it may not have used those words, but it's like, when we voice that we are breaking or we need an emotional need here, the connection suffers. So pack it up. You know what I mean? Pack it up. Let's just become the strong one. Let's become the peacekeeper. Let's become the one who understands everyone, even when no one is understanding you, And so this pattern like shows up across different relationships. So in like romantic relationships, it can look like staying with emotional unavailability. Yuck. I'm saying a big yuck because, man, I was there. Or accepting inconsistency. Can we please just decide not anymore, please? Okay. Or convincing yourself that effort equals intimacy. In friendships, it looks like you're the one who's always listening, but you're rarely being held or being seen. You're feeling drained, but you're feeling guilty for needing space. In families, hey, this is where we see a lot of self-abandonment, right? And there's this theory I read about some time back. It's called the family systems theory from Murray Bowen. And at the core of it says families resist change. If you are a black sheep like me, you understand that, right? Families resist change. And it's not because you're wrong, but it's because your growth is disrupting the system, right? So now when you start expressing needs, or expressing your emotional needs, the pushback can feel very intense. And many people end up responding to this by shrinking again, abandoning your emotional needs. But like the cost, oh my God, let me tell you, last year, this specific connection where I was abandoning my emotional needs, I want to say from like April, I just kept going back and forth like, this is uncomfortable. Something is off. Something is off. I'm not being seen. I'm not like trying to figure out what is happening here, right? And I think I caught it maybe in April, May, Uko, but I was only really making a decision, let's say, Octoberish, November, right? And so there is a huge cost to abandoning your emotional needs, right? It shows up as resentment, right? It shows up as exhaustion that like rest just doesn't fix. You can sleep for 10,000 days, apana, doesn't work. It shows up as anxiety without a clear source, numbness. It shows up from, and this is like the sad one for me, it shows up as disconnection from your own intuition. And that is so unfortunate. And let me tell you something. Once I made the choice to stop abandoning my emotional needs and consciously stepped away from spaces that require that and put up boundaries around that, I can hear my intuition so clearly. so clearly. There is this thing called false self, right? And man, I know when I get into like trying to figure something else in my life, I'll do a deep dive. If you've been a long time listener of our shows, you know this. And this I came across, it was this psychoanalyst called Donald Winnicott. And he spoke about the false self. And this is the version of us built to survive relationships, right? Not to be fully alive within them. So let me give an example of how crazy this is when it comes to false self. For the longest time, I genuinely thought I have an anxious attachment style. Genuinely, like I was sold. My therapist was not fully sold, but I was like, bruh, I'm the one living in my body. I'm the one who knows. I That was just my false self because coming out of those connections or those spaces and into connections where my emotional needs are being met and I'm voicing them, etc. Like I'm more of a secure person, right? So sometimes, which makes life so tricky, hey, but if you find a resource like therapy, whatever therapy works for you, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's ancestral, whatever healing work works for you, when you find someone to hold your hand, you can learn so much. But yeah, like you abandon your emotional needs to the point where you start creating a version of yourself so that you can survive that that relationship, right? And I just find that so sad and heartbreaking. And the heartbreak isn't that you adapted. I think the heartbreak is when that adaptation becomes your identity, because that's not you. And we have to interrupt this pattern, right? And I think the first thing I want you to sit with is, before you start accommodating someone else, ask yourself, what am I feeling? And what do I actually need right now? So I'll give an example. There is another connection where it's pretty in the early stages, and excuse my laughter because it's just so funny, right? And as it's a friendship, it's not anything weird. But this person in the middle of a conversation stopped responding, but was overly interacting with my social posts, right? And I remember thinking, I'm not even sitting here long enough to try and understand the what, why, and hows. Because for me, what I realize is like, in all forms of relationships, be it with my family, with my friends, or romantic partners, this is a friendship, by the way. I really value consistency and I value transparency. Um, it's one of my needs in terms of like conversations. Like, I need you to flag when you're overwhelmed and you need to step away, right? That's just my needs. And you are well within your right to say that is an irrational need that I can't meet. However, because I have stopped abandoning my emotional needs, it's just what I need. And so I voiced it and I took steps to be like, hey, I don't like seeing this, so I'm going to like do A, B, C, D. And I was very proud of myself, right? For prioritizing what's going to make me comfortable, and not what will keep the peace, what will make me easier to love. It was really asking myself the question, what am I feeling and what do I actually need right now? And I gave myself that, right? Another thing that's helped is to separate the need from the strategy. Reassurance is a need. Over texting is a strategy. Safety is a need. Silence is a strategy. You are not wrong for the needs. That's one thing you have to drum into your head. Like, your need is not petty, it's not immature, it's not irrational, it's not wrong. It's your need. And you have just been surviving without support. So separate the need from the strategy, right? And that'll make it clear for you when you're even just defining what the heck are my emotional needs to begin with, right? The third is maybe you could try out practicing micro asking, right? So you don't have to like pour your heart out. You've listened to this episode and you've gone all in. You can just start with like, can you check in with me tonight? I need more clarity around this. I'm not okay pretending this doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I did that, I think, over New Year's in another connection. And, we're not in the same country. And I was like, hey, I'm going to jump into New Year's before you. Do you mind giving me a call? Instead of like waiting and guessing, is this emotional need gonna be met or not? This thing that matters so much to me. I was just like, hey, can you just like, I would really like you to call me. And they were like, oh, great. I was going to call you. And I like that, you've asked for it. So practice micro asking. To be very honest, I've found it to work wonders. Like I'm just smiling even thinking about it because it's such, even in the small things, it's such a huge difference from who I was even just a couple of months ago, right? And even with my friends know I love voice notes. I vocalize that. And like I get voice notes every day from my close girlfriends. My friends know I love, what's it called? I love love letters, like write me a letter. I vocalize that emotional need and they respond by writing me letters, Another, is it another connection? Well, one of the connections I've said as an example, I love when creative people honor me by creating something for me, and I voiced it in a connection, and the person made me two things that are, I wouldn't say, they're songs. They made me two songs. So like just start saying it, and even to yourself, so that you start really believing like, yeah, this is how I like it. You know what I mean? Small asks will help you build nervous system safety. And the last thing I want you to do is notice where you abandon yourself. So start asking, in whose presence do my needs suddenly feel like a burden? Whew, heavy, eh? In whose presence do my needs suddenly feel like a burden? That question is information. It's not accusation. Like you're literally just, what's it called? Collecting data. You're collecting data. I hope those are good key starting points for you, but let's just agree this year, we are not abandoning our emotional needs. There was a time when abandoning them kept you safe, in quotes, but continuing to abandon them will just break you. A love that requires you to disappear is not love. A connection that demands that you erase yourself is not a connection. It's not intimacy, right? And the work isn't about becoming less needy. No, it's about becoming less willing to like leave yourself behind. I really hope this episode inspires you to stop abandoning your emotional needs. I would love to hear from you in the comment section. Is this something you struggle with? Have you made progress? What tips or tricks have worked for you? And if you resonated with this episode, please share it with someone that you love. Thanks for listening to the Mid Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.